Hey guys, it's Nick. Welcome to another episode of T-365. Some of you may or may not know, but even if we institute multi-factor authentication for our users, they can still get breached even with something like Microsoft Authenticator and number matching set up on the accounts. So in this video, I want to walk through the history of MFA and how it's had to evolve in the sense of the authentication strengths through the attack surface shifting. I'm actually going to show you those attack vectors, common attack methods that we see present in the industry today, as well as how you can step up maybe in your authentication method strengths so that you can help prevent against that. Some of the considerations for both those strengths that you would configure, as well as the conditional access policies that get paired with that in the Entra portal. So stay tuned. I also have a lot of end user demos of what their experience is like, because as you all know, that's a heavy point of friction today when we try to enroll and enforce MFA across the organizations that we manage. So stay tuned for that. If you guys like the content, as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more on Microsoft and the MSP space. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay guys, so to start us off here, I'm going to take us through kind of the evolution of how MFA's upgraded over time to overcome the attack surface shifting or new vulnerabilities where attackers have exposed different forms of MFA. And by the way, these might be MFA sources or MFA methods that you guys use today or your customers use today. So it's important to know how they could be breached even with that in place. But fundamentally, we're going to start here with some of the basics. Even prior to MFA, I would argue that a lot of you out there still only have passwords in your environment. So you have this unique username password combination and maybe not MFA adoption across all of your customers. I don't need to spend a lot of time on recognizing why this is something that you should be looking at as far as upgrading, but fundamentally passwords are weak. Users will choose unique weak passwords and they can be cracked very easily as well too. When we talk about basic things like password spray attacks, brute force attempts, things like that. And when we talk about stepping up our users into more complex passwords, usually then they start going into this motion of making them not unique. So the same password that they have for Microsoft, for instance, will be the same password that they have for their personal Google account, which will be the same password that they have for their Facebook account. And so if this password gets exposed, they actually have exposure into many different downstream applications. And then the last piece here that I want to touch on is that they're stored very much insecurely. So classic post-it note on your desk with your password. And somebody driving by can actually see that password as well. And so many of us gravitated towards password managers to try to overcome this as well too. And this really eliminated some of these weaknesses here, such as, it created complex passwords for us, created unique passwords for us, and it was stored centrally in this hub here. So it's not on post-it notes, it's not sprawled in a notepad on our desktop, something like that as well. But when we think about this in general, we have kind of an exposure of risk. You have your risk as it relates to a password being breached just based off of interactions with a particular user. But we also have, in most every case now with the business, your third-party risk as well, which is simply saying that whenever you register for an application and sign up with a username and password, they have a back-end database that is then storing these passwords as well too. So you can, and we have seen plenty of breaches where passwords were exposed as part of that breach, and that's why they end up being leaked onto the dark web. And this is why we do dark web monitoring, to see if those credentials that were exposed in previous attempts are leaked here. And again, coming back to our not unique aspect, if somebody gets your password here, they may be able to access all these downstream applications. And the other big thing that we saw here is that password managers themselves were inherently risky when we saw things like the LastPass incident as well, where LastPass got exposed and all those credentials were leaked as well too. So they just lose trust in these solutions, but fundamentally it's just not a good practice to have just the username password combination here as well for some of our most basic attacks today that we see in the market. So if we take a look at one of the most common attacks here, we have our bad actor. Bad actor is going to send some phishing email to the user. And in most cases, this has some type of malicious link or something that the user will inherently click on. This is why we do security awareness training. But the user will click on this link here and they'll be driven into a fictitious website that's disguised as particularly something that they're familiar with. Maybe that's Microsoft, maybe that's their HR portal, maybe it's a banking website that's been rebranded, some fake different URL here. But then what inherently happens here is they're going to enter their credentials. Those credentials are going to be harvested when they enter them here, and then the user themselves, or the bad actor, can actually go down and get access into the legitimate website here. And so they'll pass this check because they have these credentials, from the user. So if you add MFA to any of these methods, I'm going to talk about a lot of different MFA methods. I'm going to say some are weaker than others, but fundamentally, if you have any form of MFA, it's going to prevent over 90+% of these types of attacks that are very common today. So it's very important that you understand just the basic importance of having a single factor versus a multi-factor authentication going on in your environment. So when we talk about the step up from this, I'm not going to cover all inclusive methods here, obviously, but I want to touch on some of the most popular, most common in the ecosystem. What we moved into here was something known as OTP or TOTP, which is one-time passcodes or time-based one-time passcodes. And so the most common forms that we see of that in the market today is still SMS or phone. We have email. And then we have software tokens or push notifications. So when we talk about these in general, they overcame, providing a second factor, such as you getting a one-time code here sent to you in a text, or you get a phone call from an automated message that reads out a code that you can enter. And then your email here might have been your third-party email that you entered as well. And then you have your software tokens and push notifications, which really relate to some more of the TOTP aspects here, where we have Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, Authy, those types of applications that provided us those rotating tokens that we could present as well too as part of these. And so it really gave us, another method here. We still see, and I'm going to get to why these are a little bit weaker here in a second, but we still see some of our most sensitive information as a personal user on some of these really critical applications that we interact with, like our credit card companies, our bank accounts, things like that. I still see them use just SMS. And so the problems here come when we talk about the exposure and some of these attack methods as well, and why these are considered still weaker forms of authentication or not phishing resistant, if you will. So with SMS or phone, they're subject to certain things like SIM swapping, common attack here to be able to intercept the transmission, of that code. The same thing could be happening here on your third-party email. It's kind of a contradiction to what you're doing, because you might say, I want my second factor to be email, and this is my Gmail account, but my Gmail account actually doesn't have multi-factor set up. So the user maybe gets your credentials from a brute force attack, password spray attack. They can access this, and then they just send a code to the email that they access, and they can access Microsoft at that same time as well. And then, software tokens were a lot more secure, given that they're time-based, so they're constantly rotating and things like that. But fundamentally, every one of these factors is still subject to social engineering. And that is to say, a bad actor can trick you into providing one of these codes. So they could say, hey, Jim, I see that there's something wrong with your account. I'm going to send you a code via text message. You just let me know what that is. And they can easily overcome MFA. Same thing with the software tokens. They can say, what do you see on your screen right now? And then with the push notifications, what we saw and still see a lot of with these is something known as MFA fatigue. And MFA fatigue is basically saying you have your Authenticator app here. Maybe this is Google Auth, maybe it's Microsoft Auth, things like that. But all they were requesting for here is more of a yes/no prompt to say, do you approve this MFA request? So that what the attacker would do is just send hundreds of requests, or many requests to the user. And since our users are pretty reactive, or they're thinking, I need to, reply to this, they'll just blanket this checkbox and say yes. And then the attacker has gotten into their account as well too. So this really, kind of overcame in one light this attack, because when they had the fake website credentials or leak, things are like that, they tried to sign in here, they're still going to be probed for MFA at this point in time. And effectively this would be blocked just simply because they don't have that second factor. So again, this prevents a lot of attacks, but we still have exposure here when we talk about these types of methods also getting breached. So when we talk about our next method here, when we talk about overcoming some of these things like MFA fatigue, Microsoft, this is still very new by the way, introduced something into the Authenticator app known as number matching. And so number matching was different in this way because we had our same login screen here where we would be prompted for MFA, but in this way we're prompted to enter a very specific number into our Authenticator app. So on our mobile device here, instead of just getting prompted for yes or no, we actually got a prompt that said, hey, enter that number. And in some cases you can turn on geolocation mapping, or you can turn this on, it's just optional. But that'll also say, hey, are you trying to sign in from Denver, Colorado? And if you're trying to sign in from Sydney, Australia, it's kind of a red flag for you, or vice versa, right? So this is a way that we overcame certain things like MFA fatigue, because the user was not just saying, oh yeah, let me just respond to this as well too. But in a similar manner compared to our other items there that we saw, you're still subject to social engineering, which is why this is still considered to be not phishing resistant MFA. So in this use case, from a social engineering aspect, somebody could still trick the user in that they say, hey, I'm Jim from the IT department. I see something's really weird going on with your account. I need you to go ahead and enter this number into your Authenticator app. And so they're trying to sign in on one end, and they get this prompt for the number, and they tell the user what number to enter into their Authenticator app because they've gotten that prompt as well too. So can be overcome in that way. And then the other way of which that this could be overcome is something known as adversary in the middle, man in the middle attacks specifically. And then more commonly, the framework itself is known as evil jinx. So when we use this and we kind of map out this attack, we have our bad actor here. They're going ahead and they're sending potentially, again, very common that it's a malicious payload in an email, whether that's an attachment or a link or something like that. And the user goes ahead and they click on this link. And essentially here, the user's then taken to, again, another fictitious website here that actually looks and feels like the Microsoft login. So the same company branding might be applied, their company branding. It might also, it's going to have that same dialog box for enter your username, enter your password, and also prompt them for MFA. But the key thing to note here is that with the URL, it's often altered in some subtle way that the user doesn't recognize. And so in this particular example, I've emphasized this here, which is to say it's login.microsoft.com, but instead of a O, it's a 0. And they can manipulate this in many ways, and that's what we saw here with this framework and this attack method for the user. And so essentially they're entering their credentials here, so their username, their password, as well as their MFA, or fulfilling the MFA prompt, and that might be with number matching as well too. And then they're inadvertently proxied here to the legitimate website. And so the user themselves doesn't even realize that anything's really gone on, but behind the scenes here, these credentials were actually transferred and they were absorbed along with an access token, and recognize that this is a time-bound access token, so it's only good for a certain amount of time, but the attacker then can actually use that and use that token, and it's called token theft in general, and they can actually use that to sign in and bypass MFA altogether and get into the account. They breach the account this way as well. So we've seen many use cases of this occur, and this is not, going against anything that we would consider to be, or what we would think to be very strong in the sense that we're using number matching, got our Authenticator app stood up. There's a lot going on there. So this really provides the need for what we all are hearing more often these days, which is phishing resistant MFA. And with phishing resistant MFA, we are also talking about the concept of Passkeys or FIDO or FIDO2 when we talk about this as well. Real quick here though, on this note, the user here, the malicious user, is often accessing that portal or the login from their device. So they're also, in the sense of the context, they're obviously not logged into the user's computer, they're on their own device. That'll come into importance as we start to talk about phishing resistant MFA. But when we talk about this concept of phishing resistant MFA, we're going to be talking about something known as FIDO or FIDO2, which the industry is quickly renaming and getting into the habit here of just simply calling this Passkeys. And so Passkeys, from studies that have been done, have been shown to be more recognizable than what is FIDO, FIDO2, because they resemble the word passwords quite a bit. And so when we talk about, FIDO, FIDO2 and Passkeys as a whole, they've been around for quite some time actually, but they've kind of evolved and molded and gotten stronger in addition to the MFA methods, that we traditionally see. But the basic premise behind these here is that we're looking at something known as the PKI infrastructure or public key infrastructure here. And that's at a fundamental layer saying that we're using cryptography with a public and private key to be able to authenticate, which is a lot stronger method than these other methods. You'll see that here in a second. So when we talk about this, to give an example here, when you are a user, and what passkeys are in general, when you're a user and you're trying to sign up for an application, this may be Microsoft, but it might be Google, it might be other third-party apps that you're trying to sign up for. If you're using passkeys here to be able to set this up, you're going ahead and saying, hey, I want to register, right, for your account. And in past times, when you would go to register for a particular site, they would have you say, well, what's your username and password that you want to establish? And in now cases, they're saying, hey, add your phone number so we could do SMS push for MFA. But now with passkeys, they're basically saying, okay, go ahead and take these steps on your device to set up a passkey. Now your device itself may be something like a laptop, like your Windows device. This also might be a security key. And in legacy times, when we talk about FIDO1, this was like a fob that you had that you could plug into a device, things like that. But in commonplace or common times today, YubiKey is what you're going to see most commonly used for a security key. And then the other method that you'll see here today that I'm going to show you with Microsoft is actually your mobile device as well that you can use. And fundamentally, all we're saying that we're doing here is we're going to take one of these methods and we're going to generate both a public key and a private key. And so when we talk about this, the private key is going to be stored on one of these particular devices. It's going to be device specific, local as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to transfer the public key back over to the registered user, registered application here as well, registered provider. And that's going to go ahead and store our public key in their database. So now instead of a password, we're actually just storing a public key. So now the next time that we try to go sign in, we're going to say, hey, I want to sign in, and it's going to provide us or ask us for a challenge. And simply that challenge is going to say, hey, fulfill this request with this public key. And so that's going to go down and, decrypt the private key and match to say that it's that public private key pair. And then it's going to go ahead and say, yep, I passed this test, and then you'll be able to, you know, sign into the account. Now, a couple other things are going on when you do this here. So the first of which is when we talk about this being more secure in general, phishing resistant, in addition to having these keys or the private key located on this device, that when we talk about this, we talk about something known as proximity. And that simply means that this is close to you. Like your laptop is right in your hands, you got your security key, YubiKey with you, you got your mobile phone, and it's really close because you're going to do something on it. And then the other aspect of this that we look into is kind of this gesture concept as well. And so when we think about, you know, a laptop, if we start there, we're often using Windows Hello on our laptop. If it's a Windows device, and this allows us to do things like use Face ID. We can use a thumbprint. Or we could use a PIN. The security key, oftentimes you're plugging that into your device and then you're either putting in a PIN or tapping it with your finger. So it, you know, kind of proves that you're there, not only on the device, but it's that second factor, something that I have, something that I am as well too. And as we'll see on mobile, this is also something where you're using Face ID, you know, to validate that request as well too. So that's going over, and you're doing that at the time of authentication here. But the other key thing to note here is that when we talk about this private key in general and what it's doing, effectively here, when we talk about this passing value coming over to this application, the private key is actually not being transmitted whatsoever. So it's being used to decrypt and say we have this public private key match from what was generated originally on the device, but I'm not actually transmitting that. When we get back to our legacy methods of MFA, where you had people who could capture data in transit, whether that be our password or our one-time codes, it's really not able to do that because we have that not transmitted over that signal as well. So this is very important because it increases the security here, and because of the proximity, because of the gesture, it provides layers of phishing resistant multi-factor authentication as well too. So if we say this is phishing resistant and we go back to this as far as the man in the middle attack, you might be wondering, well, how does it prevent against this? In this sequence, if the user is on their device, you know, to be able to sign in there and maybe using their key. The other key element here that we have to recognize is that whenever you go and you do this registration here, what also gets logged is the registered provider. Also, sometimes just people are going to call this the origin as well too. And so whenever you're signing and kind of registering this key, it's also going to store this value with this origin value as well too. And in this case, it might be login.microsoftonline.com. And so whenever you're validating your sign-ins here, it's also checking for that registered provider value. And so effectively here, if a user did go to this malicious website or fake website here, and they tried to log in, they would actually get denied here as this being a check, because it would recognize that this registered provider doesn't align with the passkey that was generated as well. And this would prevent this phishing attempt from actually happening. So that's where that really comes into play as far as the things that you can do here with this, and kind of how that breaks down and gives you more of this phishing resistant factor as well. But some of the other considerations that this allows you to do here is when we moved up from FIDO1 to FIDO2, we got capabilities to go completely passwordless. So prior to that, FIDO1, you could use username, password, and then the fob or whatever you wanted to do there for your security key, maybe Windows Hello. But now with this, we don't even have to put in a username or password. We can just simply go into the sign-in options and use the device in general, that where we have the passkey stored, and then we fulfill it with some gesture as well too to replicate that. And the other consideration here that we come across that you'll see here is that we have capabilities for cross-device authentication. And so that is simply saying that you don't necessarily have to be on the device that your passkey is located in order to log in. And I'll be showing you this with a Microsoft solution that's in preview right now, might be out in GA by the time you watch this video, but effectively saying here that maybe we have this laptop, that we're trying to sign into, and as a user, I'm trying to sign in here to this laptop, and my passkey is actually not located on this particular Windows device maybe. And so with Microsoft solution, you can actually go into the Authenticator app. You can register a passkey on this device. And when a user goes to log in here, they're going to be prompted to sign in, and then they're going to get a QR code to go ahead and scan on their phone that they can then approve with the Authenticator app, much like you would do in the past. But the big thing with this is that it allows for still, this device-bound authentication, in that you have this proximity factor still coming into play with the authentication in mind, where that's my device, it has the passkey on my device, it can't be replicated to an actor or bad actor's device here. But then it gives us this quasi-roaming activity to say that, well, I can roam given that I can still sign in to this particular environment because I can scan a QR code and still get in. And so it's device bound, still back to the user record, but they're able to sign into different devices here as well too. And so that's a big piece of this, and just kind of like capturing FIDO2 as a whole. When we talk about kind of the expansion here, these are really the two big buckets that I'd like to put that expansion into, which is passwordless and cross-device authentication, as well as additional support for more browsers, different device types. In the past, I think we've seen that the security key might not be such a great option to roll out to users because they maybe lose them. It's a heavy administrative burden. And we'll get into, what does the life cycle look like for a passkey, given that it's not a physical object that they have to carry around. It's still their mobile device, things like that. But what happens when a new user needs to register? What happens when they lose their phone? We'll get that in the demo content that I'll be showing you as well. Now, the last attack method I'm going to show you actually can bypass even, the FIDO2 concept here, or the passkey concept. And this is something that is known as pass the cookie attack. So with this attack vector, we have our bad actor here, and they again have gotten access to a user's device. Some malware has been installed on a device, and I would like to say in many cases this is probably because the user is acting a personal device, or trying to access their account on a personal device that isn't protected by our security controls. And how that malware got onto that device, a lot of different areas, could be, again, our classic example of a malicious link here, for the user. A malicious attachment could also be an executable from some untrusted software that they downloaded that was on the device. But effectively here, the user themselves might have clicked on that link in general, and by doing so, their device itself kind of got hosed in the sense of having malware on the device. And when this happens, the attacker can run some scripts, and in many cases, we've seen this with Mimikatz, if you're familiar with that, but they can effectively go into the browser or just run a script here, and they can extract the cookie or cookies out of the browser that is the user's session. And so effectively we're saying here that this user, in the sense of the browser, if we say this is Microsoft, they've gone down and they've authenticated here already. And even if they're using, the passkeys here, they've technically authenticated. It's their device, that they've authenticated to. So there's a session cookie here. And again, this is time bound. But if an attacker goes ahead and they grab this session cookie, they say they have possession of this, they can technically, on a different device, this is their device here, they can technically enter that cookie and inject it into a browser window, and they can essentially check this box to log in to Microsoft. And you'll see this, I'll demo this out, but you don't even get prompted to log in. You just refresh your page with that cookie in there, and it'll have your session of this user within there as well too. Now, Microsoft's working their way, I think, through conditional access policies, and I'll show that here as well, to overcome this with the device bound aspect of that, and cookies being part of the scope within conditional access policies, but it's not quite there yet. So I'll kind of cover how you overcome this as well. But in a lot of ways here, we're looking at a mix of our security to overlay into this, not just MFA, right? We want to have protections. We want to say things like, for the user, in this particular case, no personal devices, right? We want to make sure that our security stack is on that device. And in this case, like where we had, maybe Mimikatz running to pull this script, often cases, Defender or some other EDR or AV vendor that we have installed is going to be preventing that from even running as well on the device, really preventing the malware from even happening to begin with, so that the user can't get the cookie. In general, the other things that we could look at here is really your Defender for Office 365 protections as well too, where we get into your safe link protection, your safe attachment protections, your anti-phishing policies, those types of things that might help prevent even, at fundamentally this layer from occurring where they click on this link and they're actually taken to this page without that page being blocked as a whole. And that extends to all the attack vectors that I really mentioned here. So there's a lot of different options here. The last option that I'll talk about that is a known way to prevent this today as well too is called strict location conditional access evaluation. This I've wrote about in the past about conditional access policy, so I'll link to that if you want to check that out. But it's basically just saying if you're not part of this trusted location, we hit a IP that's not part of that trusted location, we're not going to allow you in. So it's kind of IP restrictions in that way, so that if a user did capture this cookie, they try to use it on this device, they'd be coming in from a different IP, and then they would be blocked, from getting access in this way as well too. So we've certainly covered a lot here in the sense of the different forms, different methods, and I really wanted this video to highlight passkeys. So let's go into the Entra portal now, and let me walk you through how you set up these passkeys and what the end user experience is like as well too, just so you can see the level of friction there, both between setting them up on their web and setting it up on the Microsoft Authenticator app. Okay, so getting into the configuration here, if you go under the Entra portal under protection and authentication methods, this is where you can see your policies for all the MFA types that you have. And generally speaking, what I like to do is go into attend and I disable SMS and email, in a lot of these cases, voice call as well, just so that we prevent kind of those legacy methods that I kind of mentioned through that video are really easier to get exposed through common methods. But if we take a look here at the time of this recording, the passkeys option is still in a preview state. So within my tenant here, I just see 502 security key, which is what I'm going to show you to view the passkey on the Authenticator app in that workflow. But just know by the time you are watching this video, you might just see something that says passkeys right here, which is I think where Microsoft's heading. But within here, you can scope this to certain users or groups. And by scoping it here, you're not saying that they are enforced to use a security key or passkey the next time they sign in. That you would control with conditional access policies, which I'll get to here in a second. This is just simply saying that they're eligible to, and they'll be able to add that. They go to the security info section of their profile, and we're actually going to walk through a user doing that. Under the configuration though, I've set this up so that we're using this new Authenticator, and this is the time again is in preview here. And whenever you say, use key restrictions, if I said no here, these GUIDs would kind of be grayed out. And that's effectively saying that I can specify specific keys in here, whether that's iOS and Android keys or GUIDs versus maybe some GUIDs they have for the YubiKeys that are issued to the organization. And so the key thing to note here is if you enforce key restrictions, you'll see on the user page that I'll show later that the YubiKeys are actually disabled when you do this. So you're really saying instead of a security key, I want you to use these Authenticator apps. So let's actually walk through that. But first, before we do, let's go into conditional access here. Authentication strengths, is what you can apply as far as the grant controls for a user. So we have passwordless, we have multi-factor authentication, and then we have phishing resistant MFA, which does include Windows Hello, our Passkeys, or certificate-based authentication. And so within here, I've created a very basic policy that you'll be able to see, which is just called Passkeys. And I've scoped it to one user just for the purposes of this demo, targeted all cloud applications here. And under the grant controls, I've selected phishing resistant MFA because I want that authentication strength as well too. So you need to select one from the dropdown if this is your first time selecting it. And then let's walk through just kind of seeing that for a net new user who's signing in for the first time, and they still technically, have a password here as well too in this use case. So I'm here on a device signing in for the first time as a user here, and we have a conditional access policy that's in place to enforce this phishing resistant MFA. When I sign up here, I'm going to get asked to say, hey, more information is required, and enter in additional information. And in doing so, you'll see that I get this message here that says to create a passkey, you need to sign in using multi-factor authentication. Contact your admin to enable additional methods to support this. So this is important to note here, just given that if you go and try to deploy with the phishing resistant passkey method only, the user really needs some way to establish that first before going in and using that ongoing for their sign-ins. So within the Entra portal here, you'll go under the authentication methods, under protection, under policies, we're going to click on temporary access pass. Don't have it enabled here, and you can select all users or select all users in groups. You could exclude people if you wanted to, and you could edit some of these default settings as well too. And in this way, I'm just going to go ahead and say yes and save for now. From there, I'll go under all users. I'll find this user that I want to provide a temporary access pass to. I'll go under authentication methods. I'll click add authentication method. I'm going to choose temporary access pass from the drop down here. You could say that there's a delayed start time. You could say the activation duration is good for up to 8 hours, and that's again based off of the default settings that you set as well too. So depending on when you're going to provide this, you just want to make sure that user has enough time to use that. You could also select if this is for one-time use. Now I got my temporary access pass here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And in this scenario, we're going to assume we're just providing it to the user. Back in my login experience here, I'm going to go ahead and sign in or try to re-sign in. I'm just going to say use another account so I can retype this in. I'm going to enter that temporary access pass. And then notice here that it defaults to entering that as my next sign in instead of asking me for a password. From here, what I noticed is that I was put into this indefinite loop here, and I realized that it just needed some propagation time from Microsoft whenever you first enable the temporary access pass before this actually starts working. So just keep that in mind if you're just enabling temporary access pass in the tenant. So if you don't run into that propagation error with the temporary access pass, when the user signs in there with that, they'll see those two methods and they'll be able to add this new method here. I'm going to first show you how to set up a YubiKey as a security key. So we'll select that USB device here, and this is going to walk the user through setting up that YubiKey. We're going to go ahead and be asked where to save the passkey. I'm going to show you the iPhone and iPad option, but this method I'm going to show a security key. We're going to select that, and this is just going to walk the user through kind of what is going on behind the scenes and giving them some prompts that they can send to as well. From here, it's going to ask the user to insert that security key into the USB port. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If the YubiKey already has a security key pin, it'll be asked to put that in as well too. If it doesn't, that you can establish one as well. Now it's going to ask me to touch the security key again here, and that's part of that gesture process. And then it's finalizing the setup here. The last step here of which being you put in the name of the key, and if you have multiple keys, for instance, like maybe a backup key, You can name that something different. From here, the next time you sign in, you don't even have to use the username password option. You select this. It's going to go ahead and prompt you to sign in with a passkey. I'm going to show you the Windows device as well, but in this particular case, you can just select your security key that you've set up, and you'll be asked to enter that PIN. The YubiKey was already plugged in, so it didn't ask me to plug it in. It's going to ask me to touch the security key, part of that gesture process, and then I'm able to go ahead and finalize my login. The next thing I want to show you guys is signing in with a passkey that's bound to your Windows device. So I've already set this up here for my account, and actually if I look for passkey settings, you'll be able to see the passkeys on your Windows device here. And again, this is that registered provider so that we get that phishing resistant method here to be able to sign in with. And so if I'm in a browser, if I go to office.com, I can sign into my account. And then this is going to use Windows Hello. And I can use my Face ID there to be able to sign in. I could also use a PIN, or I could say use another device as well, and just click OK. And this is again using that passkey as well to sign in. And I've authenticated there. This works for the devices that you have that are in a joined state and you're using Windows Hello. Extending that functionality, I wanted to show you guys the pass the cookie attack to a certain degree here, just so you can see that I'm signed in to the account that I just used the Windows Hello option on. If you were to go into the inspect tool, application, and cookies here, you have this cookie that has this name ESTS auth persistent, and it has this token as well too. And that's my session token, that has that grant across that for what I use to sign in with. So I'm actually going to copy this as well, and you have the domain of .login.microsoftonline.com here, and I'm actually going to try to mimic this into another browser on a different device. So I'm here on a VM, and I'm in an incognito window of the browser here for Chrome, and I'm going to go to login.microsoftonline.com, and it's going to take me to the sign-in page here. I can click on inspect and click on application. I can go into the cookies here for this website. I'm going ahead and adding this cookie here for the ESTS auth persistent. I'm going to go ahead and add that copied cookie value that I got there, and I'm just going to put a dot here in front for this particular value. Now that I have this in here, I can simply just click on refresh, and nothing happened here. So what did I do wrong? Oh, I spelled this wrong here. So if we go change this to an E, and now we refresh, you'll notice here that I didn't have to do anything. I just was signed in. So on a normal attack, the user will use Mimikatz, some type of PowerShell maybe, to harvest that cookie, from the browser, and then they'll just use that and they can put it in here, and then they're signed into the account. On this note of the pass the cookie attack, Microsoft does in the session control for your conditional access policy have one of the customizations that I talked about that can prevent that, which is the continuous access evaluation, where you strict location enforcement. This is in preview at the time of this recording, but you do have to set up the network locations, where you have your trusted IPs, if you will, and that would prevent them, because as soon as that new device and IP was detected, it would say, hey, this isn't trusted, and the continuous access evaluation would block that user from signing in here. The other policy that we have that's in preview here that I think will expand into protections for that as well too, which is required token protection for sign-in sessions. So certainly this could help with our man-in-the-middle attacks that we were looking at. But in order to get this enabled here, you have to switch this particular setting into scoped applications. At this time, it's Exchange Online and PowerShell. And if I do that, I can go back under the session control, and this will no longer be grayed out. And if we go into their documentation here, I think I was hopeful for this, in the sense of it's like, hey, this needs to be bound to the device, and creating that connection there for the refresh tokens and the tokens that they have. But then they have this note here: we may interchange sign-in tokens and refresh tokens in this content. This preview doesn't currently support access tokens and web tokens. So that's a bummer. So this is what I was looking for in the sense of the support. Maybe that's coming in the future there, hopefully, with this as well, just so we can start to prevent that type of attack. So next, I'm going to show you guys how to register a passkey for Microsoft Authenticator for iOS. I'm going to go ahead and add a user here. And I've set this user up again with the passkey, temporary access pass, I should say, to sign in here. I've got my access methods here, and I again showed you why this would be disabled for the YubiKey given the settings that you configured in the Entra portal. But I'm going to add this sign in method, and then you get this option to say passkey in Microsoft Authenticator. Then it's going to start to prompt this user with it now. So it's going to give them a download link as well, which is not optimal given I would love it to have a QR code or something like that for the user. So you can click on next here. You can say what device do you want to use. I'm going to use this. And then this is where I think it gets a little hairy as far as the user capabilities of being able to do this, because they kind of have to walk through these steps here. And then they have autofill for passwords and passkeys is turned on, and then select Authenticator and click on continue. Because otherwise, if you don't do this, you're basically saying that the default option, or what the user would see, is to save it to their personal iCloud keychain. And we'll see more of that here as well. And then you'll be able to, select choose when you say create a passkey. If you don't have that enabled, it'll ask you whether or not you have Microsoft Authenticator or you want to save it to your iCloud keychain. You can click on understand here. And then this is where you're saying, where do I want to save this passkey? We're saying on the iPhone. And then we're going to get this prompt here to scan this QR code. So here on my mobile app, I'm going to be using the camera to scan this QR code. I'll get that link there. And this is where I'm going to be prompted to set up a passkey. I actually altered the settings on the phone just so I can show you the user getting the option, either the keychain or the authenticator. But you can select the authenticator, use that Face ID there to finish up the setup. And then the next time that you do go ahead and sign in here, you're going to be prompted with another QR code, so similar flow with the link. But then you're going to be shown the security key, the pass key that you have on this device, and it's located in an authenticator as well. And continue through, get the Face ID, and finish the sign in. Okay, guys, that's everything I have for you today. Definitely comment below with any questions you had about the content that I covered. And remember, any form of MFA is going to be better than no MFA whatsoever. It's going to prevent most of those common attacks like our phishing attacks. So at least get that into place, even if it's SMS. It's better than nothing being in the tenant today. And then look how you can step that up over time and operationalize around it with some of the recommendations that I provided today. As always, like I mentioned at the beginning, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week.